Well, at long last, here's that Sekiro follow-up video that I was talking about. Let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music, and today I want to highlight my top 5 favorite boss themes from the Sekiro soundtrack. Now, originally I was planning on doing a top 10, but while going through the soundtrack, I found that there were really 5 truly exceptional pieces of music, and if I extended this thing out to the top 10, I'd probably be just splitting hairs over songs that I think are really cool, but don't really compare to the 5 exceptional pieces of music that I'm going to talk about today. And speaking of exceptional music, man, I have completely come around on this soundtrack here. What was originally my third place choice for all the soundtracks from FromSoft's series of games has quickly become my second favorite soundtrack, just behind Dark Souls and overtaking Bloodborne, which was originally my second place choice. While I don't like every piece on here equally, the score overall is melodic, textural, percussive, emotional, and atmospheric, and sets the tone for each part of the game perfectly, and also works as great music all by itself, completely divorced from the game. The string work on here is particularly excellent, and takes center stage on most of the songs. And the mix of shamisen, shakuhachi, brass, vocals, and synths all do a great job of adding texture to what is a very melodically and just musically dense compositions. My only real major complaint while listening back to this soundtrack is that the taiko drums are just a hair too prominent in a lot of the tracks, and they seem to be a little bit too predictable in the way that they punctuate a lot of the different phrases in the compositions. For the most part, they do work, and they really add a sense of drama to a lot of the songs, and certainly add a lot of motion to them. Ultimately, there are a few times where I find them to be kind of overbearing, and they're kind of annoying in some of the tracks. But in all honesty, that's just a minor complaint for what is overall a varied, textural, beautiful, emotional, atmospheric soundtrack that I have absolutely loved listening to, and I'm really, really glad that I sat down and actually gave this guy a listen. And I gotta say, now that I've had a chance to actually listen to this soundtrack a bit more fully, I can honestly say that it is an expertly composed soundtrack, which will transition nicely into what you came here for, talking about those boss themes. But before getting into the ranking, I have to set up a few ground rules. Number 1, this list reflects my own personal musical taste, so that means everything on this list is completely subjective, meaning that if you disagree with any of my choices, please sound off in the comments of what boss themes you would have put in your own Sekiro boss theme ranking. And 2, this list reflects how good I think that the songs are musically and compositionally outside of the game, and really has no bearing on the overall quality of the bosses in-game. And 3, I'm not covering many bosses, if only to keep this list as concise as possible, and quite honestly, while there are some cool mini-boss themes contained in this soundtrack, honestly, it's the main boss themes that stick out to me, and that's why I wanted to highlight them here. So with all of that being said, let's get into my number 5 pick for the best of the boss themes from the Sekiro soundtrack. Number 5, Demon of Hatred. The Demon of Hatred's theme stands out to me thanks to its searing strings, aggressive percussion, and its sense of dread and doom. But beyond that, the use of shakuhachi and the way it harmonizes with the string creates this feeling of despair and discomfort that's also beautiful and emotional. It represents when I think the soundtrack is at its best, which is why it ended up in my number 5 slot. Number 4, The Phantom Lady Butterfly. This was the first boss theme that made me stop and go, okay, now that's an awesome boss theme. It's heartening, lacerating, almost drunken strings make up the majority of the song's arrangement and melody, and are so melancholic that one can't help but get a little emotional when hearing it, even for the first time. It would be the biggest gut punch of all the songs on the soundtrack if it wasn't for... Number 3, Emma, the Gentle Blade. Another immediate standout theme, and it is very much in the vein of Lady Butterflies, in that it's a terminally sad song that does an amazing job of making you extremely uncomfortable. But emotions aside, the harmony of vocal, shakuhachi, and strings are just incredibly beautiful. It is a shame that it is one of the shorter themes on the list, but that doesn't make it any less impactful and doesn't take away that it is definitely one of my favorite themes from this soundtrack. Number 2, Corrupted Monk. This came really close to being my number 1. Of all the battle themes, this is the one that sticks out the most to me. The unnerving rising strings create a tension that's completely unique to this song and this song alone. Add on top of everything some excellent string-based percussion and an equally excellent second half, and you have a contender for one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack. There's just an overall atmosphere to this song that makes it stand out on this list. And before we get to my number 1 pick, I just wanted to get in some quick thoughts on some of the other boss themes. Folding Screen Monkeys, a spooky, kind of eerie theme that has a cool sound and vibe that's ultimately as forgettable as the boss. Which leads me to...
My name is Gyoubu Masataka Oniwa!
Sorry, couldn't resist. It's a big, grandiose boss theme that's perfectly servable as a piece of battle music. And that's about it, which honestly has a lot in common with Ashina Ishin. This is the theme that I probably have the least to say about. It's just kinda fine. It serves its purpose as a great epic battle theme, but it does very little to stand out in my mind, as opposed to Ishin the Sword Saint. The final boss theme sounds exactly like it should. Well, I will say that it's more memorable than the previously listed themes. It suffers a bit from having just too much shit going on in the arrangement, and it really keeps it from being the standout boss theme in the game, which is especially troubling considering it is the final boss theme of the game. It's fine, I don't hate it, but it's definitely not one of my favorite pieces. Genichiro Ashina. I really like about half of this theme. The first half really creates this beautiful tension with its string, but in the second half, it just sort of falls into the same trap as the previous 2 entries. It's not necessarily bad, and definitely one of my favorite themes of the ones I've talked about so far, but when compared to my own personal favorites, it's not even close. Guardian Ape. This one actually got really close to making it on the list. Its blending of brass and strings complement each other beautifully and create this extremely uneasy, unnerving tension that made it one of the first themes to really stand out in my mind. It would have made it onto the list, but there's just themes that I enjoy more than this one. Father Owl. This should have been the final boss theme of the game. It's loud, aggressive, tense, and exciting. And most of all, it's one of the tightest songs in the soundtrack. Sadly, this is the only theme on the list that I have no experience in-game with, since I still haven't fought this boss yet. Great Shinobi Owl. I got so close to putting this on the list. This was another one of the themes during my first playthrough that immediately stuck out to me. It has the uneasiness of Guardian Ape, the mysteriousness of Folding Screen Monkeys, and the engagingness of Genichiro. It's dynamic, exciting, unique, direct, and easily my top pick of all the themes that didn't make it onto the list. And with all that being said, let's get to my number 1 favorite boss theme from the Sekiro soundtrack. Number 1, Divine Dragon. Dear God, this might be one of the most beautiful pieces of music from any game ever. It's so full of inspiration, spectacle, and wonder that it belongs in a Miyazaki movie. And while it is still quite a busy arrangement with a lot of instruments going on at the same time, it really feels like every instrument is working in service of creating a drop-dead, gorgeous melody and atmosphere that, despite its many changes and movements, it never ceases to be amazing. Quite honestly, it doesn't feel like a single note is being wasted on this song, and it all comes together to create a one-of-a-kind piece that stands head and shoulders above the rest of the soundtrack. I mean, honestly, just listen to this song for yourself. While going through and listening to the soundtrack from start to finish, this was the only song that truly made me pause and just admire the beauty, quality, craftsmanship that this song has. It's absolutely a jaw-dropping track, and while I probably could prattle on longer about it, I think I'm just going to leave it there. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you like this video, please leave a comment down in the description. If you had any boss themes that you would have included on this list, let me know down in the comments which ones you prefer over my choices. If you want to hear any of these boss themes in full for yourself, please head over to my WordPress, because that's where I'll be posting music links to any of the tracks that I talked about in this video. And as always, make sure you're here on this channel at 2 p.m. Japan Standard Time for Live from the Record Room. There you can hear me play tracks like the ones that I talked about in this video, as well as a whole host of other tracks in my record collection that I don't get a chance to talk about in these videos. Links to everything, as always, down in the description. That's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!